think addiction is an internal battle that's displayed externally. And a lot of these men are struggling. Self-esteem, self-confidence, lack of father figure. With kids whose dads are ultra successful, just not around, and the mom will do like anything for them. Anything. I'm sure you know moms like that, Larry. They just do anything for their kid. And the kid feels like inferior to the father. He's like, oh my God, like my dad's a successful attorney or business person. Like I want to be like a musician, or I want to do something else. And there's a lot of pressure to follow in those footsteps, when really right intention, but just the wrong impact, right? Because now these kids are like feeling like if they don't do that, my dad's not going to love me.
Doug, what is going on, man? Welcome to the Dad Edge podcast, brother.
Larry, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
It's an honor to have you. We're going to get into some really interesting pathways and stories and all kinds of stuff, but I want to start. I'm always intrigued to ask this of all my guests, because I always get just a variety of different answers. But first question I have for you is, what was your childhood like as far as like growing up? And then most importantly, what was the relationship like with your own dad?
Childhood for me, I mean, there was a lot of adversity in my childhood. I mean, looking back now and, interviewing a bunch of people on the podcast who have crazy stories, it's like I have a different perspective on it just from maturing, and then also being like, man, like, what am I complaining about? But when I was in the thick of it, it was pretty bad in my own eyes. I mean, my parents got divorced when I was roughly 5 years old, and it was at a time when, there wasn't a lot of families splitting up, specifically in like my friend group. So I kind of was wondering what's wrong with me. Like, why is this happening to me? Why is my situation different? And then, I was also the kid who loved sports, loved playing sports, watching sports, staying up to watch Sports Center, collecting baseball cards, all the things. And yet I wasn't like gifted as an athlete. So I found myself being picked last in gym class. I found myself not making the teams that I wanted to, being cut from teams in middle school and high school and stuff like that. And I started to develop this what's wrong with me mentality. And that led to me developing massive insecurities, anxiety, which inevitably led me down the path of addiction. And I'm sure we'll get into that later, but staying on the theme of like family dynamics and trauma, my dad and I didn't see eye to eye a lot when I was growing up. I think that he wanted what was best for me, just like any other dad. I just think that there was some level of disconnect between the way he was conveying and the way I understood it. And that caused a lot of friction. And I didn't agree with some of his decisions that he made as a dad. I'm sure he didn't agree with some of the decisions I made as a son. And with that said, I was, there was a lot of turmoil between us. And when, like I said, my parents were divorced, so they split custody, 50-50. And my mom and I were significantly closer, and ended up getting into some trouble where I had a party while she was in the hospital when I was 15. Then I got busted with some weed on my 16th birthday, so she kicked me out of her house, and I went to go live full-time with my dad, changed schools, changed households, all within like 24 hours. And it felt like the biggest like slap in my face, if you will, because, my mom knew that I didn't have the best relationship with my dad, and I also now know that she did the best that she could. Like, I did some pretty bad things as a kid that, in a way, I can understand why she did those things. And I mean, my mom and I have a really, really solid relationship now, but I say that because then I go live with my dad and we're already butting heads. So now this is just like adding fuel to the fire, and ended up being kicked out of his house shortly after I graduated high school. And after that, like, I haven't returned. I haven't lived with either one of my parents since then. And there's been like this, I guess, journey over the last 2 decades of forgiveness, acceptance, loving somebody for who they are. Because for a while, I tried to fit the idea of a dad into the mold that I thought it was supposed to be, based on what you see in the news or based on what my friends had. And I've had to realize that it just wasn't the path for me with him. And I've had to learn to, do the best that I can with what I have within that regard because, like I said, because we didn't see eye to eye for so long, there was a lot of friction in our lives. And it wasn't until maybe like the last probably 10 years where I finally found like massive peace in that, where I knew that if I had to work on my side of the street, keep that clean as best as possible, and it was up to like kind of him, to kind of do the same on his end. Because what I realized is like, I spent a lot of time blaming people for my problems in my life. And as a result of me doing so, it gave me almost the green light to act like a jerk and live however I wanted to, because I could always point back to the thing, my parents' divorce, the way I thought I was mistreated, being bullied in school, like all these things that in their own right, people are like, man, like I can see why you did that. I could see why you chose to abuse drugs or sell drugs. But it got me nowhere other than continuing that pattern of behavior. Um, so there's a lot I guess that I've had to unpack with my relationship with my dad. I mean, it's taught me, you know, it's helped me understand if I ever have kids, like what I want to be like as a father, what I don't want to be like. It's helped me, I mean, just also like just learn to have compassion for humans and just being like, man, like I might not like see eye to eye with this person, but I can still have love and compassion. So I guess that's a long-winded answer of saying like, in my childhood when I was experiencing it seemed quite chaotic. And looking back, I can see why I thought that. I've also learned just through maturity and just healing that the more I used my childhood as an excuse to behave a certain way or to look at it in a negative light, the easier it is for me to fall back into like the victim mindset and feeling sorry for myself, which got me nowhere but incarcerated.
Yeah, and I know we're going to move to that story here real soon, but I just want to reflect back on a couple of things. So, you grew up, you and I kind of scary grew up very similar, as it relates to like youth athletics, fitting in, no real father figure in the light, and if there was, it was kind of chaotic, it was traumatic, it really wasn't great. I think when you have a childhood like you do, like I do, like I can really relate to like, the sporting things and trying to fit in, and I was bullied. And I think when there's that missing link of a dad, and I share this because like, so, and I'm not sharing this story to pat myself on the back. That's not what I'm doing. But I had just something that I experienced last night that as I was giving this experience to my 9-year-old, it was a reminder that I didn't get an experience like this when I was younger. And what I've noticed is for a dads have, I think, this tremendous role in kids' lives to build them up with their confidence, right? To basically create a strong, young, confident man or woman, right? And I think dads really have a lever when it comes to that, is like building confidence, creating even situations of adversity and things that are tough, but also cheering your kid on as they get through it, and like, so like last night, my 9-year-old, he's done, I think, tons of different sports. And he and I sat down and talked about it last night. He's done soccer. He's done baseball. He's done jujitsu, but it was a while ago. He's tried wrestling. He's done hockey. And he has recently started martial arts. And so he's doing taekwondo. And he has like completely come to life. Like it's all he wants to do is he wants to practice every day. He only goes to class Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturdays. And he refuses to miss any of those classes. And we practice together on the off nights every night. And he's getting ready for his first belt test. And we were practicing last night. And I noticed this metamorphosis in him over the past month of like unbelievable confidence and certainty of himself. And quite frankly, it was different a month ago. He wasn't that kid. He was very, he questioned himself. He was a little bit softer, a little bit more gentle. Like, had tough with eye contact and handshakes, and everything kind of intimidated him. And I've noticed that when we talked last night, I was like, what's been the biggest game changer for you? And he said, this. I was like, what's this? And he goes, this, me and you practicing every night. And I was like, that's been the thing. He goes, yeah. He goes, that's what's made me feel better. And I think that's his way of saying that is what's this practice, this time, and being able to do things like this have really helped my confidence. I think that's kind of what he was saying in 9-year-old terms. But I look back on maybe a childhood like you had and what I did, and we didn't really have that. In fact, I think we had the opposite of that, which probably made us seek out comfort in other ways, like I know you did, like I did. But your path, I want to get to this point where you're in 24 hours. You had moved out of your mom's house, you're into your dad's house, and this was, I believe. Do I understand this right? You had 21 jobs by the time you were 21. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what was? Take me to that space and time of like that 5 years of moving in with your dad, and what's going on there? And 21 jobs by the time you're 21.
Yeah. So like first, I mean, my dad was around. It's not like he was never around. It's more like it was just like oil and water, right? We just didn't see eye to eye. And I think his way of trying to hype me up was just a way that didn't sit with me. I think he was pushing me to be like the next Michael Jordan when I couldn't even like touch the net. You know what I mean? As a kid when I was jumping. And I think that he maybe that was just his way of being like, hey, like I see more potential in you, but yet like the reality was the potential wasn't there. And you combine that with a kid who's already got low self-worth and low self-esteem when you feel like your dad isn't believing in you or he's, setting these expectations that are unrealistic, it creates more inner turmoil. And, I don't think it was, you know, malintentioned on his end. I think it was more of just the circumstances. And then, what ended up happening was the bullying was the most harmful thing for me as a kid. When I was in grade school and people were telling me I looked like I had Down syndrome, I'm significantly heavier than I am now. I'm like wearing husky clothes when I'm in middle school. I'm gaining like body fat when my friends aren't gaining body fat and I'm doing similar things. So that was like what was the most painful for me was the bullying. And so I felt this void inside of me to fit in. And initially I
Yeah.
tried to fit in with weed when I was 14. And then that led to me being addicted to it. Then like, when kids are young, the one thing that people celebrate is when your parents go away. Try to throw a party and you're like the cool kid, right? And then my parents like never left. And if they did, I was always with the other parent. So I was kind of screwed, you know what I mean? And so there was an opportunity when my mom was going to go have surgery in the hospital, which, I still feel terrible about. Um, and I decided it was a good idea to leave like the downstairs window unlocked, go in there and have a huge party in a townhouse. Of course, the cops came, they find everything. And that was like the big needle mover and me essentially getting kicked out of her house. And like I mentioned, I started to smoke weed every day and had built up enough of a tolerance where I needed to sell a little bit on the side to make some money to support that habit and smoke for free essentially. And on my 16th birthday, my brother was supposed to like watch the door while I was like weighing out a little bit of weed for a neighbor. And my mom like walked into my room and that was just like it. And
You were
and I had,
16?
yeah, I was 16 and I'd had some behavior stuff. Like I was angry. I think I didn't know how to deal with my emotions. I didn't know how to manage stress. And, it's interesting. And I think people will relate to this specifically given where the self-help space is right now, which I'm a big fan of, but I think there's flaws. Is I remember Tom Bilyeu asked me this question when I was on Impact Theory, and I don't remember if this part made it in the interview or not, but I remember him being like, what would you have wanted to hear, like the young Doug, what would he have wanted to hear?
Gosh, what a good question.
And
What'd
he,
you say?
I said to him, I was like, man, like I would say, it's the way that kids treat you is a reflection on them and not you, blah, blah, blah. It was something to that effect. And he looked at me, he's like, dude, is that really what a 12-year-old would want to hear? And I just remember being like, man, like, you're right. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what I would have wanted to hear in that moment because it's so tough. Because as a kid, you all you want to do is like fit in and like go to school and like be able to smile throughout the day and feel like you have a good group of friends and feel like you're kind of starting to see the light on some life trajectory on where you're going. And like I think these phrases, because I mean his answer was, you're right, like that is like the right answer, but it's not the right answer. You know what I mean? Because it's like as adults, we understand that, but when you're like 13, it's really hard to contextualize all that stuff. And so I just remember like as I've thought about that area in that time of my life a lot, I just think like the only thing I really wanted to know was that things were going to be okay, and that
As Go ahead.
like I wasn't going to be a complete failure for the rest of my life because I had just I would come home from school and I would cry because I was like, man, I'm not good at school, I'm not good at sports, I'm not good at relationships. Obviously, I can't keep a job because like I had 21 jobs. I was got my first job. I think I was 14 washing dishes. I ended up like leaving so I could go smoke weed. Left a bunch of dishes for people to clean in like the retirement home I had worked at. The people couldn't eat their food the next day or something like that. Then I get a job at Panera Bread, and then I got a job at just different places before I was 16. It didn't work out, and so my what's wrong with me, you're a loser mentality just kept getting reinforced and reinforced and reinforced. And so when I got kicked out, it was like I said things to my mother that no mother should ever have to hear from her son, like
Like
ever.
what things?
Like, I'm gonna kill you, like all the just out of anger, like I hate you, like blah, like just some really bad stuff. And it was just out of a lot of pain. You know what I mean? Just pain in my life and pain of just not knowing what to do and just trying to hurt her as much as possible because I was hurting. And that's no way to live a life. And I also know that when you're a kid, like you're not thinking as logically as you do when you're an adult. Like, um, it was just a really like awkward and rough time when I was 16. And through that, we obviously then had a a massive strain on our relationship and ended up changing high schools, which I think, logically it made sense. Like, all right, this kid is misbehaving. He's addicted to weed at the time. He's not able to keep a job. He's running around with the wrong crowd. Let's like remove him from this environment and put him in a different environment. Um, and all it did was just create more trauma because now I've got massive abandonment issues
Yeah.
and I feel like rejected once again. And mind you, I think, when I talk about like what I said to my mom, I can't remember now if I'm thinking about whether it was like, I wanted to kill you or I hope you die. It was something it was horrible stuff like that I just blurted out in just anger and emotion that, I had to live with for a while and accept. And there was a lot of work my mom and I have done in our relationship to get to a point where we're at now, where we have this amazing mother-son relationship that's better than even the good times of when I was a kid. But I go to this new high school and like immediately I do whatever I need to fit in, to find the people who have the drugs so that I can continue on this path. And then that led to me just skipping class quite regularly, riding around, smoking weed with my friends, barely graduating high school. And then once I did graduate high school, um, you know, I got kind of introduced to a guy who was selling a bunch of weed, like pounds of weed. And I had no like real outlook on life as far as like what I was going to do. So I decided to kind of give that a try. And that ultimately is what kind of fueled the next layer of my addiction, because now I'm like selling weed to make money. And it's created this whole new addiction of being wanted, being needed. Like I felt so much power and people blowing my phone up looking for weed. And I would sometimes answer, sometimes I didn't. If I was out with my friends getting high, I was like, yeah, I'll get it later. Like I know that I was needed in that way. And that became super addicting. And then as you like move up the drug game, you meet new people that have harder drugs. And then I got introduced to Coke, started snorting Coke when I was like, I think I was like maybe like 17 or 18 years old. I forget. Um, and then because I was the guy who had like naturally low self confidence because of the way my life was, I loved Coke initially because it gave me this like artificial dopamine rush that's unlike anything else that boosted my confidence in the near term. But long term, it created way more anxiety for me because, Coke's an incredibly harsh stimulant, right? And I started to get crippling panic attacks to the point where I was in the hospital multiple times thinking I was having a heart attack because, and at the time, like I thought that it could have happened. I was a guy, again, 50 pounds heavier than I am now, eating fast food all day, every day, smoking weed, snorting Coke, smoking cigarettes. And I had been to funerals for like friends of mine that died at that time when I was a teenager. So it wasn't like out of the question for me to kind of join, you know, that crowd, so to speak. And I hit this crossroads, Larry, when I was like, I think I was like 19. I mean, some of those years are kind of blurry as far as specific dates, but I got to a point where I couldn't get high. I couldn't smoke weed without having a panic attack because I developed some sort of, I don't know if it's like a phobia or some sort of like just obsessive panic to where because I had had a panic attack, smoking weed and doing the Coke the one time, and then I went back to the hospital again. I thought to myself that every time I got high again, I was going to have a panic attack. That was my biggest fear. And so what happened? I'd get a panic attack. And it got to the point where my friends and I are like, we bought a book at a bookstore on how to solve like panic attacks. And mind you, this is like 2006. Like no one's talking about mental health. I mean, back then at all, let alone mental health for men. Right. So there was nowhere for me to turn to. I didn't even understand what I was going through. Like I'd never heard of a panic attack. And whenever I would like start to freak out, my friends would just be like, go read your book. And sometimes I would have to like stop my own car, let them drive. Like it was crazy, dude. And then one day I was over a buddy of mine's house and we were, just getting high and stuff. And he's like, hey, dude, try this like 5 milligram Percocet. And I tried it. And I when I did that, not only did I get super high from that, but it took away all the anxiety that I had around getting, smoking weed and stuff. So I was able to then continue on this path. And that 5 milligram Percocet turned into me doing hundreds of milligrams up my nose every single day to the point where I was missing part of my left nostril. It was corroded and had to snort like 150, 160 milligrams of oxy up my nose every day to get out of bed. And what really brought me to my knees was those painkillers, and so much so that I thought my life was going to end because of it. Cinco de Mayo of 2008, I was riding around with a few of my friends to make a drug deal, and I had a busted headlight that I had been meaning to fix. I'm 20 years old, and when you're like in the thick of addiction, all you care about is who you're getting high with, how you're going to score your next batch of drugs, etc. Like nothing else really matters. So I put off changing this headlight, even though people were telling me like, dude, you're riding around with a bunch of weed, money, drugs. Like if you get pulled over, you're screwed. And I flashed my high beams at the police officer who was running radar to hide the fact that had the busted headlight, but it just gave him a reason to pull me over. Oh no. Pulls me over. My heart sinks in the pit of my stomach. I think my life is completely over at that point. And he ends up like coming up to the window. I stumble to get my license and registration out. He knew we were up to no good. And I had a half pound of weed in my trunk, a couple $1,000s in cash in the glove box, and he found everything. And I got arrested that night, charged with the felony, possession with intent to distribute marijuana. And like, I just remember sitting in the back of that cop car that night and being like, man, like, how did I get here? How did the boy who just wanted to fit in had the boy who just wanted to be loved and good at sports. Like, how is he now in the back of a cop car facing felony drug charges? And now it's easy for me to say that it was due to the fact that I just couldn't deal with discomfort. I couldn't manage pain. I couldn't figure out how to be a kid. And because of that, I made a slew of bad decisions that compounded over time. Some big ones, like the stuff with my mom, were some big bad decisions that created a lot of turmoil and trauma in my life that allowed for these other smaller things to, snowball, if you will. And then got taken to jail that night. And
can I interject here really quick?
Okay, go for it.
Because there's a huge theme that I just want to capture here. And I think it's really important for us to discuss it really quickly, and then also to really shine a light on this for the dads out there who are raising kids. I can relate to your story, big time. Unfortunately, well, I guess fortunately, I never got into drugs when I was a kid. And my mom was a very heavy drinker, and every guy she was with was a heavy drinker. So drinking actually wasn't my thing. But food and porn were. That's where, so like same thing. Like I didn't have like necessarily a food and porn problem, but I had a discomfort problem. And that's where I found like, comfort, or like I could just forget about my problems. So I overate. But like, I want to go back to something that you stated because I think it's so important. And I really, really got to give Tom some props because he's really, really great at questions. But going back to like, what would 12-year-old Doug need to hear, right? When you said that, like I paused for a second and I was like, man, like coming from the childhood I did, coming from the childhood you did, as a parent, because I see my kid, I know you don't have kids, but I do. And when I see my kids going through turmoil, and I can't take the pain away, but I know that they're going through turmoil. And a lot of times what I can tell them is like, keep pressing forward because it will be okay. This too shall pass. Everything shall pass. Right. But as a parent, and kids who want, immediate gratification, waiting days for discomfort to pass feels like years to us, right? And when you say, even I remember when I was a kid, and sometimes, people who were inspirational get in your ear and be like, dude, hang in there. Like one of these days, life will look totally different and it will get better. And my first thought was like, well, when the hell is that going to happen? Like, because I could really need it now. Like, I don't want to wait till I'm an adult. I'm 12, right? But so I think the core message here is this. If a young man or a young girl, in that age range, if they are not getting validation, if they are not getting, proof that they are enough, if they do not have a foundation or a place where they can go to where they are loved and they are safe, they will go seek it out other ways. Absolutely no questions asked. It's just which path are they going to take? Are they going to pour themselves into something good? Because let's face it, there's kids out there too that pour themselves into positive things. Like they've got to make the best grades. They've got to be the best at their sports. Everything has to be perfect. Otherwise they feel like they won't be loved or accepted. And the same thing for the opposite of that, which is, kids who don't feel that way will go in the opposite way. They'll be like, well, I'm not getting attention, but I can get it other ways. Right. So I just wanted us to reflect on that for a moment because I think it's so important for the guys to hear your story and to be like, hey, what can I take away from this? And I think one of the takeaways of many is if your kid is not getting validation, if they're not getting safety, if they're not getting love, they're going to go get it elsewhere.
Right. I mean, that's so true. And I'm glad you brought this up because, a couple things come to mind. One, I think the old saying, just suck it up, toughen up, is just not good, right? I think
It's not.
I think the message is there. I think it's delivered the wrong way. I think that when I'm hearing you say hang in there, and I think that again, it's true when you're an adult and you can emotionally like critically think your way through that. But I'm like, man, like, well, when? Because there's so much out of my control right now, and the things I can control I suck at, and the things I want to be good at I'm not, and a lot of this, like, I didn't do anything wrong. You know what I mean? Like when you're being like picked on for no reason, the idea in your head is like, what did I do to deserve this?
What did I do? Yeah.
And and the same thing with like sports and stuff. And so I think that I mean, there is no like silver bullet answer for any of this. However, I do know that I just wanted to feel like safe and not like this the lovey dovey safe necessarily, but just like safe enough that I knew that I was going to be okay in life, and then I wasn't. And then what was going on during those years in middle school and high school weren't going to continue to repeat themselves. The
Yeah.
problem becomes when you're a kid and you don't understand the value of going through stuff like that. Like now I look back and I'm like, man, like,
Yeah.
am I
Great
thankful?
lessons.
Am I thankful for the way I treated like my mom? Like, no. However, I am very thankful that I endured so much stuff growing up because it's built a great framework for me to tackle things as an adult. And that lesson, 95% of the time, you don't get that as a kid. You know, it's like you said, it's the instant gratification. And it's probably, I mean, gosh, this is pre-social media. It is way worse, I'm sure, now for kids.
Way worse.
Because of what technology and social media has done to kids' brains, that the need for instant gratification is probably like 10,000 times worse, right?
It's crazy. Yeah. Me and my son, we do a weekly show right now, and we talk all about these things, like from his perspective and mine. I definitely want to move on to when you met Brad Pitt in Fight Club in the cell. So we're gonna get to that here in a second. But I do want to say a couple things here. There, you know, the advice of toughen up, man up. I will tell you, there is a time and a place for that, but it is minimal. It's like 1 to 2% of the time. The missing ingredient with toughen up, get through it, is when you tell your kid that, they're like, okay, I get that, but can you tell me how to do that? Or can you help me on the how on that? Because the toughen up is just like, that's not like, it's kind of like if I were to say, hey, how do I get down to the Enterprise Center? Which is where the St. Louis Blues play. And without GPS to tell me the how to get there, the turns and all that, it's just like, it's downtown. Go drive. And that's like, that's about as good as advice as toughen up and get through it. You're just like, okay, I get that. I'll get there, but like how, and can you be my guide? And then the second thing is this, is that for a young boy, right? And let's talk about it, because I think girls may be different, right? They need maybe more of that lovey-dovey, emotional, safe place. A boy, yes, to some degree they need that. But I think you're right. You nailed it, to where like, what does a boy need? A boy needs to know like, you're valued here. You're good enough here. You're an asset to our family here. And my kids and I refer to home as the dugout. And I think I have 4 boys. So I'm just like, hey, when you strike out there, or you get out, or you make an error, or like something bad happens, the dugout is always the place to come, and you'll be welcomed. There will be conversations, right? But there will be support and love from your home team. And I think boys really understand that. Like, I don't think you have to put it necessarily in this lovey-dovey thing. You can, but I think they kind of relate to, if they're a sports kid, they might relate to something like that.
Man, you just heard Doug talk about what happens when kids don't feel safe, they don't feel seen, they don't feel validated. They're going to go look for acceptance somewhere else. And a lot of times it is not where we want them to go find acceptance. Usually it's in a really, really bad place. The funny thing is the same thing is true for us as business owners. If you don't have a brotherhood around you that challenges you, that sharpens you, that has your back, well, guess what? We are going to drift as well. And yours truly, what I can tell you is, in times where I've drifted as a business owner and I've drifted as a dad, I've drifted as a husband, it's when I didn't have people around me that I could lean into. And trust me, you were like, well, you probably do, you do this for a living. No, it's not the same. I need support too, and I need a group, and it's not going to be with my clients. I need to be around other business owners that I can lean into as well. When you're leading in the home and when you're leading in your business, we need other people around us that we can lean into too, because we can only take so much. And like I said, that's why I developed the Dad Edge Business Boardroom, is for high-performing business owners who want to build a thriving business and not sacrifice anything at home. They want to build an unshakable family, an unshakable marriage. They want to live an uncommon life. If you're ready to join us and the other business owners that we do life with, head on over to thedadedge.com/mastermind. You'll see the pathway over there for the boardroom. Apply, book a call with our team, and if it's a good fit, let's rock and roll. All right, gentlemen, back to the show. But,
Yeah.
but anyway, I want to move on to, you're incarcerated now,
Yes.
and you're probably in the worst shape of your life at this point, and you get put in a cell with this dude who's been there for a while, who looks like Brad Pitt from Fight Club.
Yes.
And this is the guy that you are in a cell with.
Yeah, man. So I reported to jail October 21st, 2008. This was after going to court, being arraigned, officially found guilty and convicted of a drug felony. And the first thing I had to do was detox from the opiates cold turkey, which lasted weeks. And my soon-to-be cellmate was sitting there playing Scrabble, and he looked at me, and he could just tell, like, my confidence was low. He could tell I felt like I was pissed, didn't want to be there, just walking around like a zombie. And he's like, dude, you're going to start working out with me when you get through your detox. And I looked at him like, dude, like, I could be a model for Pillsbury right now. Like, there's no way I'm going to work out with you. He's like, all right, man, whatever. And then or shortly after that, I see him like working out, and he's doing like so many push-ups, pull-ups, like climbing all over the jail. I'm like, man, this guy is insane, in crazy shape. And we ended up having this conversation that has really changed my life. He was asking, like a good coach, he was asking me questions, like open-ended questions. He's like, why are you in jail? Like, what happened? And I'm like, my parents. Start blaming everybody else but me. And he's like, well, why are you addicted to drugs? I'm blaming everybody else but me. And he looked at me and he just said, like, quit being a bitch. And I remember just standing there, like, kind of shook. I was like, what did he just say? Like, you don't want to be called a bitch in jail, right? Like, he's like, dude, you're blaming everybody for your problems but yourself. He was like, you're blaming your parents, you're blaming your friends, you're blaming everybody but you. He's like, there's plenty of people that had the same experiences as you that didn't end up in jail, right, Doug? And I'm like, yep. He's like, you have two choices. Be a man, look yourself in the mirror, and say, you got yourself here and it's up to you to change, or go be a bitch, or go cry in the corner and say, woe is me, and blame everybody else for your problems and cry about it. And it was at a time where I just, like, Larry, like, the drugs had started to come out of my system. Like, I was the guy, again, 21 jobs by the time I was 21 years old. Horrible relationships with my family, as I've discussed. Drug addict, felon. I clearly didn't have life figured out. And this guy had what I wanted. Like, this dude was ripped and he was jacked. And I was like, man, I wanted to be like that. So I was like, maybe
Even on prison food, huh? Even on prison food?
Yeah.
Because they don't feed you too well in there, do they?
No, it's not the best diet. But I just was like ready to listen. And, he gave me that, it's funny, like, we transitioned from just talking about the man up advice. And it's like, I think during times like that is where you have like a little window to really get through to somebody. Like, the long game doesn't always work, because I just needed to hear that phrase in that moment, because I didn't want to be identified as that is the word that he called me. And I'd also began to realize that I was the common denominator of all my problems, and there was nowhere for me to run or hide anymore. Got down to a push-up, couldn't do one from my feet, couldn't do one from my knees, could barely walk up down the steps. And with his motivation and encouragement, training me in there every single day, I was able to do a set of 10 push-ups and run a mile by the time my sentence was over. And that...
How long was your sentence?
90 days.
90 days.
So that, like, time was the biggest confidence booster for me, because I think, self-confidence, in my opinion, it's not like the big things that necessarily count. It's like believing in yourself and getting through the times where you don't think you're going to make it, but you just figure it out. You know what I mean? That's where the confidence comes from. And, like, for me, I never thought I could do a push-up. I never thought I was going to be able to, like, stay off drugs. I never thought I would survive jail, but I did. And because I did that, it just has developed this foundation for me to get through hard times. Do I struggle during hard times every once in a while? Of course. Like, I think it's human nature. However, I have this innate ability now to know that I'll get through it no matter what, which I didn't always have. And so fitness, like to me, is the biggest, one of the biggest things I should say you can do to transform your life. I think it's the catalyst for all life transformation because of what it does. For me, it taught me the importance of getting comfortable, being uncomfortable, showing up for myself even when I didn't want to do it, building real discipline, stacking small wins, investing in myself, like all these things that we know are so important for life. And the day I left, I cried because I just felt this massive,
The day you left jail?
yeah, I cried. It's kind of weird, right?
Like, as in, like, it was transformative? Like,
Yeah.
not, or like, what was it about that made you emotional?
I mean, for one, it was like this dude, my cellmate, like came into my life and showed me like unconditional like love and support during my time in there, and helping me change my life. Like this guy was like on me as far as accountability, making sure that, I showed up for my workouts, instilling motivation in me when I didn't believe in myself. Like he was there for me, like in that way. And just, and I look back and, he's since passed and we can go into that too. But, um, I always wondered like, why did he pick me? You know what I mean? There's plenty of people in jail. Like, what was it about me that he decided to lend his hand and help me and help me use fitness to transform my life? And I remember, so that made me cry. And then it was like, I just felt different, man. Like, I just felt like I finally was on this path that I had deserved in life. Because I knew I wanted more for myself. And I felt that to some level I deserved that. Even when I was going through hard times, I just didn't know how to do it. It's like you said, some of these kids can't figure out like the blueprint or how to do certain things. And then, so it was just like a wave of emotion that I just didn't know how to like deal with. But then I left jail. I asked my cellmate, I was like, how can I ever repay you for what you just did? And he's like, don't mess up and pay it forward. Gave me a workout plan that I framed still here in my place, so I never forget where I came from. Got out, lost a bunch of weight, and that inspired me to become a personal trainer and then write some books and do what I'm doing now. But the big question is, what happened to him? So him and we exchanged some letters when I got out of jail, and I still have them saved here just for sentimental purposes. But it was funny because like at first it was like I got out the day after Christmas, so it was cold here in Baltimore or in Maryland. I wasn't in Baltimore City necessarily. I was in Maryland, but I didn't want to run outside. And I remember like telling him that in a letter, and he's like, "Man, I train machines, not wussies," or something like that. Like, go to Target and buy some sweatpants. So I went out and bought some sweatpants and like got my runs in that he had prescribed for me when I got out. But we ended up meeting up when he got out, and it was cool to actually do his workouts with him and not the novice stuff he was giving to me. He was prescribing me in jail. And then it was like this shift happened where, he went down a path that was different than mine. And, I became his inspiration, for his life. And the torch had kind of been passed from him to me. And, we met up a few times and, unfortunately he just I just don't think he could really get his life back together. And, I got some terrible news that he had passed away, and his family had heard about me either through him or just seeing stuff I posted on social media. And they like thanked me because, I get on this podcast like this and I talk about my story and stuff to, inspire people and have open conversations like we're having now. But I never thought it would be like part of like his legacy, to where family members were reaching out to me and be like, thank you so much for highlighting like this side of him. Right. And like thanking me for sharing the story. So I actually went and spoke at his funeral and got to share this story, the jail story, like with his friends and family at his funeral. And so it was just really amazing to see like how things completely came back full circle. And it's just been something that's been incredibly meaningful for me to be able to like, have conversations like this. But yeah, man, like that's kind of the jail story in a nutshell, if you will.
Well, the fact that this all comes around and, that you're helping this guy, Right. And then not to mention the fact that the family is like, thank you for also painting this picture in this side of him, which I think is just such an honor, you
Yeah.
know, that you get to do this. I want to go back to just a couple things though as well. You mentioned in there that your mom and you have now sounds like reconciled.
Hmm.
I'd love to hear more about that. And then what's the update with your dad now?
So the relationship with my mom and I mean, I wouldn't say it got worse before it got better, but it took some like real
Sure.
acceptance and forgiveness on both of our ends. And it took me
Yeah.
realizing that if there was any chance of reconciliation, I had to do the work on my end. And then if I did, there was a chance that she would come back around based on how I behaved, before I went to jail. Because I think that when people get on this positive transformation, they accept they expect everyone to believe that they're going to change your life forever. When it's like, wait a second, like for the past 10 years, you've been lying to us and acting a certain way. And now you read some book and you're happy for 2 weeks. Like, you think that we're going to believe you. So I had to like let go of that mentality. And it was just a compounding of me just getting my life back together and her seeing what I was doing and us having, conversations about stuff and forgiveness and understanding things on her end. And just took a lot of like vulnerability, I think, from both of us, like for me to share my perspective, her to share hers, and then just having some level of understanding. And I think also letting go of the fact that of being right. I mean, like, all right, like if I want to be right in the situation, it's not going to help our relationship. Why not just be heard and understood instead? And so I think, when you're vulnerable and when you have these conversations like I did with my mom, it really helped. Like she didn't know like a lot of the stuff I was battling as a kid because I kept a lot of it internal. I didn't tell people what was happening because I was of fear of parents calling other parents, calling the school, and then that adds a whole other list of problems, right? If you're being bullied and picked on. So and it also just required a lot of consistency. I mean, I've been at this now. I've been out of jail since '08, December 26th, '08. It's been almost 17 years. So it's just been a long ride of showing up in that relationship, making the time, making the effort to be in her life. It's been amazing. I mean, her and I have a really, really solid relationship now, and we have for some time. With my dad, I mean, I think right now it's just as good as it's gonna get. It's not, I wouldn't say we have the best relationship. We don't have a bad relationship. I mean, I think there's just been, um, a lot of acceptance, I guess, on both of our ends, a lot of forgiveness on my end, hopefully on his as well. And I mean, hopefully it gets better than it is now. And we're more active in each other's lives. But I think part of the problem is like, and again, I take responsibility for the way I behave, but when you are forced to when you are on your own because of choices that you made and you're like super independent, you kind of you teach yourself in a way that you don't need people. You know what I mean? And so there wasn't that need for that role in my life for some time. And so, but I ended up seeking out like other father figures, whether it's, I mean, been in the perfect business as a personal trainer where I trained a lot of successful people. And what I would really like seek from them wasn't like how they made money. It was more like, man, like I would see them with like their kids and their families and I would take notes on that. They would rub off on me or how they showed up at work and consistency and stuff like that. That I learned to kind of model my own way of how I wanted to be a guy and what I wanted, what I didn't want. So I was very blessed to be in an industry where people like that can easily rub off on you. But the work with my mom is one of the most important things I've ever done. And I think it's just because I knew that if I didn't, there would be problems for me, compounded problems later on from that lack. Because she was the one I was the angriest at as a kid. And I'm just super thankful that her and I are in the place we're in now. She's an amazing person. I love her to death. Awesome support system. She's so proud of where I am now. And it's just been pretty crazy, like to see this ride that I never expected to be on. You're a kid and, it's like you have this evolution of like, oh, I'm going to be an astronaut. Then it's like, oh, I want to be like an accountant, and then it's like, oh, I think I'm going to be a drug dealer the rest of my life. And then you go to jail and it's like, oh, I'm definitely going to be a drug dealer the rest of my life. And then it's like, oh, now I'm a personal trainer. And it's just, I hope this just shines light, because I think a lot of people, Larry, I'm sure you can relate to this. They think that they have to have everything figured out like right now. And they don't think they're going to get to that place. But the one thing I've learned is it's like what you said to your kid. It's like, just keep showing up, keep going, and then when you do that, the evolution of yourself becomes more clear, and you start to shift into these natural things that you're gifted at based on your life experiences and the talents and the skills and stuff you develop over time.
I love that, man. I love the fact that this has a happy ending for you.
Yeah.
Right there, or I would say a happy continuing journey. It's because definitely not the end. But you mentioned that you obviously help people with fitness now, right? I mean, but the story I'm telling myself is this goes way beyond just helping people with their fitness.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it that I've figured out and why I think I became very successful as a trainer wasn't because I knew the best workout for people to do. It's like I understood how to relate to people. And I don't know if you call it luck. I don't know if you just call it like me just being gifted from my own life experiences and what my cellmate taught me. But, when people would come to me and they were like, hey, like, I want to lose like 20 pounds, I was able to like relate to them with that and share from my own experiences where they could relate to, or if somebody wasn't feeling good about themselves. And so what ended up happening was I did a lot of stuff with like helping with their mindset, behavior change, their habits and stuff, because I could relate to where they were at and help them make incremental changes. But one of the spokes of the wheel that I've been really passionate about over the course of my career is really helping like young men who have battled mental health issues and addiction use fitness as an outlet for them to improve their self-worth, their self-confidence, and rebuild their life. Because what I found is a lot of young men that I've seen that struggle with addiction and mental health, there's a lot of lack of confidence there, self-worth stuff. Am I enough? I don't fit in, all these things. And I think when you can focus on improving somebody's fitness, getting them stronger, getting them more endurance, etc., it allows them to like improve as a person and celebrate like these wins in areas of their life that they can see, instead of like focusing on all the stuff that they haven't achieved, if that makes sense. And so I've been, somebody that's been almost like the secret weapon, I think, for people, because I'm not a therapist. I'm not like, I have no formal education and coaching necessarily. But for some reason, when I tell parents like, I'm not a therapist, and they're like, I get it, I know, like, but I want you to talk to my son. That for some reason, they just see a video of me or they see my content, or like, my son needs to talk to you. Please talk to him. And it's always been like, through fitness and being like, that's like the bridge. And then
it's the bridge, yeah.
Yeah. Then when they ask me like how I got into fitness, it's like easy. I'm like, oh man, like, you want to hear the PG version or the R-rated version? Like, oh dude, give me the R-rated. It's like they want the truth. I know, like, I was in jail, and they're like, what? So it's been a crazy roller coaster with that, because I've gotten a good understanding of what like young men struggle with, because I get to know them, I get to talk to them, and obviously like I outsource where I need to. Like I don't come in and act as a doctor or therapist. It's more like I'm the guy you come to if you want to help your kid get fit, if you want them, that they need somebody to relate to, if they can help guide them on the right path in life. Like, I'm your guy. And just these kids just seem to relate to me, and they have. And I think that what people miss when they're like looking at addiction, and again, I mainly, this is just from like a guy's perspective, is I think addiction is an internal battle that's displayed externally. And a lot of these men are struggling. Self-esteem, self-confidence, lack of father figure. A lot of the themes I've seen are with kids whose dads are ultra successful, just not around, and the mom will do like anything for them. Anything. I'm sure you know moms like that, Larry, that just do anything for their kid.
Sure.
And the kid feels like inferior to the father. It's like, oh my God, like my dad's a successful attorney or business person. Like I want to be like a musician or I want to do something else. And there's a lot of pressure to follow in those footsteps when really right intention, but just the wrong impact, right? Because now these kids are like feeling like if they don't do that, my dad's not going to love me, you know? And so it's been a really cool experience for me. Again, like I just kind of got thrown into it. It started with somebody like saw a video of mine, I think, reached out and was like, hey, like I want you to talk to my son. And, you know, I've helped kids, and there was like a kid that, you know, his dad like shook my hand. I remember being like, you know, my son wouldn't have graduated high school without you. So thank you so much. Like just stuff like that. That's really like made my life a bit different than I thought it ever would be, just with the ability that I have to do what I do.
Well, I think, like you said, you know, fitness might be the bridge, but it's the relatability. It's the fact that you can speak the language of whatever that kid's probably going through or whatever that person's probably going through. I've noticed that even in my life with what I do, because like I did this for a long time, you know, before I was certified in coaching, you know, I was just off of raw experience and relatability, you know, helping people. And, you know, I think people, there's a lot of people out there that I think really gravitate to that because it's not a licensed therapist. Mm-hmm. It's not somebody who maybe is supposed to help you, or it's the person that's like, I relate to that person because of their experiences and their story. They're just a little bit ahead of me, and they can maybe, it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier, to bring this like all full circle. It's like man up, grow up, do this, do that, but there's no direction. But when you can relate to somebody, when you can talk to somebody like you, it's like, let me insert some GPS in here that you might relate to.
Yeah. Well, and it's like it's like a double-edged sword, right? It's like, cause if I were to give like somebody the blueprint, like, hey, do this, and they didn't do any kind of real work to embrace the journey and figure things out on their own, then you miss a huge part of the value of them figuring it out, like their ability to decision make, have some level of emotional intelligence, to learn to embrace the suck, delay gratification. But it's also like this dance, because if you give them no direction, they're going to be like, well, you know, dad or whoever, like, this is what I thought you're here for. Like, I'm 15. Like, what am I supposed to do? You know, and it's like this, I'm sure I'm not a parent now. So I think it's a different level of comment from me. I can only speak from my own experience and people that I've worked with, but I can imagine it's like a hard dance for people like you that has had your own experience with all this stuff. You have an idea of the framework that may work for most cases, but you also have realized that I don't want to like be a helicopter parent or a snowplow parent and just get away, push all my kids' problems away and enable them, and then just create this perfect path for them, because you know where that can lead. I just can't imagine like how tough that dance is now for parents like yourself that have done the work. You fundamentally understand like human nature and what it takes to become emotionally intelligent and successful in this world, but you also don't want to like punish your kid because you've figured it out on your own. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I totally get that. Let me ask you this, because I really want to put a bow on this for the guys out there who are listening to it. What do you think? You've worked with a lot of kids. You've had a lot of parents like reach out to you. Hey, can you talk to my kid? You've worked with a lot of grown men who probably have grown up very similar, and they're looking for a mentor. What do you think is the missing ingredient? So if you were to advise dads out there to be like, hey, before this becomes a real problem in your life and for your kid, do these one or two or three things that will really help you hedge against an outcome like this.
I mean,
what'd you tell us?
I think number one, set an example, be a good role model. I think one of the biggest problems that happens is parents will like say something to a kid and the kid will watch them do something completely different. You know, it's like in the fitness world, you know, if a parent is telling a kid don't eat Oreos and they're at home eating Oreos in front of their kids, there's going to be a massive disconnect where the kids just aren't going to kind of believe. So I think like just modeling behavior, I think, is really important. Number two is figuring out a way to get your point across or your guidance across in a way that they will actually understand it. Because the toughen up, or you will get through this, like all that, like you said, there's a time and place for that. And I think it's necessary in some circumstances. But how can you convey that to a kid when they're like, they feel like the world is like against them? Like, how can you convey that message where they feel like you care and you understand them? You know, it's funny. I've referenced this video a couple times, and I don't know if you saw this. I don't know if you follow Dr. John Deloney, but
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
he was talking about like how he won't let his kids have Snapchat. One of his son has Snapchat. Did you see that video where he said, "Just tell your friends that your dad's a loser," and he's like, "I can't because that's not true." And it was like one of the it's like one of the best things I think I've seen. I mean, obviously all the dads like, yes, but it's like, it's just, it was a great way for him to bring some level of humility and vulnerability to that conversation, right? That I'm sure was like tense, because you tell a kid they can't have Snapchat. It's like telling me I can't have my protein shake. I'm doing, it's tough. So I think the relatability aspect there, and I think the third thing is just educating yourself. I think it's like listening to podcasts like yours and reading books, and just because it's a different world, and I think things evolve, and like I just think like anything, you have to stay up to date on things, and just not being afraid to do the work and reach out, ask for help, be in a strong community of other like-minded individuals that are like on that same path, because it's like anything else. If you're in this echo chamber of parents that just are super hard on your kids, you're pushing them to be like better at sports than you were because of some unfulfilled dream you have, or whatever the case may be, like you're going to think that's normal. Whereas if you're around parents and other men, they're like, man, like I'm trying to do this. I'm not going to be perfect, but I'm trying to get this thing right. And you have that strong support system of people that you can lean on, ask questions, feedback, hold you accountable, etc. So, I mean, those are the three things that come to mind: accountability, community, relatability, and just modeling behavior for your kids so that they can like kind of absorb how you're living your life.
I love that, man. I just want to make sure that we tied that in a bow, and I agree with everything that you said about being the example, being the safe haven, be the dugout, for your kids. If they're not getting this validation, this type of thing from under their own roof, they're going to go get it elsewhere. I know you've got a free book for the guys. I want us to tell you, but I want you to share what's in the book.
So I wrote so the felony ended up coming off my record back in 2014, because the judge, when I went to court in September of 2008, sentenced me to 5 years, but he suspended everything but 90 days, gave me 5 years probation, 200 hours of community service, all kinds of fines and drug classes. But he said, Doug, you're young, you're 20, because I was a couple weeks before my 21st birthday when I went to court. He's like, this conviction's going to haunt you the rest of your life. He's like, you do everything without messing up, I'll take the felony conviction off your record and give you probation before judgment, which is essentially like a pass, taking the conviction off your record. And now it's actually fully gone. But I completed everything that he asked me to do, didn't mess up, didn't fail my drug test, stayed off drugs, and did my jail time, all that stuff. And so I went back to court. He took the conviction off my record, and I just felt like this huge like weight off my back, and I wanted to tell the story. So I was like, maybe 26, 27 at the time when I wrote the first book, From Felony to Fitness to Free. And it's essentially, it just goes through my childhood from my perspective. And if you want to learn more about like kind of what I went through, some of the thoughts I was feeling and the transformation around that, you can actually get it for free at dougbopst.com/free. And essentially it walks through a lot of what we talked about now. I will say, looking back, I could tell reading it now that I still had some unprocessed like emotion around my story, that, it's been a good solid, a decade plus, that I've gotten a lot better at processing some of that stuff that, you know, going back, I mean, as much as I think that book is inspirational and the story is really cool, I definitely would have written it differently knowing what I know now. But again, that's hindsight. You know, it was very therapeutic for me to write, to get a lot of that stuff off my chest. So instead of paying for it, you can get it for free. If you go to dougbopst.com/free, and you can like learn more about the journey, my childhood, and kind of echo what we talked about today.
I love it, man. Well, guys, you won't have to look far for that. You can just go to thedadedge.com/1384 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/1384. We will have Doug's links in there, social media, as well as a free copy of his book for that link as well. But Doug, thank you so much for coming on the show, man, and sharing your story. This has probably been one of the most powerful transformations that I've heard to date. And thank you for being vulnerable and authentic enough to share everything you did today, man. This was awesome.
Brother, thanks for the kind words. That means a lot coming from you, because I know you've had a lot of amazing guests on here. So thank you for your vulnerability and for your transparency as well. It made the combo really simple and transformational for me too.
Appreciate you, man. Appreciate you very much. Well, dude, thank you so much for jumping on.
You got it.